Welcome to Wisdom Chat Podcast that shines a light on the world of money and well-being. I'm your host, Phil Holdsworth, founder and director of Aurum Gold, guiding you through candid, easy listening conversations with industry insiders from a wide spectrum that impacts money and well-being. Today, I'm joined by Jan Sky. Hello, Jan.
Hi.
To talk about her book, The Many Parts of You, and to inspire change. Jan is a behaviour change specialist around leadership, but she's more than that. Jan is also an entrepreneur in neuroscience, being the creator of the ESI mapping tool. She is director of Brain Potential, an author, a trainer, and coach, and has joined us all the way from Australia. So get comfortable and let's dive into Wisdom Chat Podcast. Jan, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia. Whereabouts in Australia are you based?
I live on the Gold Coast, which is in the state of Queensland, sunny Queensland.
Wonderful.
Yes, it's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah, I mean, just the name itself sounds quite exotic, Gold Coast.
Yes.
So it conjures up a certain sort of mindset in terms of what that might be like if people have never actually been there and visited. But thank you so much for taking the time. Now, I know the time difference between us. You're now in your evening. I'm still in my morning. So I really do appreciate you giving us your time.
My pleasure.
I mentioned in the intro the ESI mapping tool. Would you just like to just let everybody know what exactly is the ESI mapping tool?
Sure. Well, ESI stands for Executive State Identification. And in about 2008, I completed a diploma in ego state therapy. It was for clinical use, but I saw the potential of taking the ego state theory further by introducing it into coaching, into the workplace, into other modalities, taking it out of the therapeutic environment, although it's perfect there. And I thought that what was lacking was a map. And so I developed this tool that I called the ESI mapping tool. So it maps the many different states a person has, both supportive and inhibitive, in relation to a particular goal they're trying to achieve.
Okay. It was interesting as I'm reading about it in your book, The Many Parts of You. You sort of recount quite a few stories. You do talk about, and we're talking, you mentioned earlier, it takes you back to about 2009.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. So, and you talk about sort of initially utilizing the tool within the prison service, but you saw some remarkable results. Could you just sort of tell us a little bit about that?
Well, my tagline in relation to the prisons I was in New South Wales at the time, was that I spent 15 years in and out of jail, but I was working with prison inmates. And I had the opportunity to work with them, helping them to identify, I mostly work with men, by the way, but helping them to identify that their criminal part wasn't their only part, that they had many other parts of them. Yep, there was a part that committed the crime, hence the accommodation that they're sharing with these other guys right at this moment. But there was another part of them, and I helped them to just source out these different parts. Like they might have been a dad, they might have been a partner, they were a worker, they were a friend, they were confident, they were scared and fearful. And just in working with them, because men quite often don't like to identify their emotional states, but it seemed like a really practical tool that they could use. And with my assistance, it brought out of them, I'm not just my crime.
Yeah.
There's more to me.
Yeah,
than
I
that.
think we're not so good, are we? As men, we're not so good as talking about um, anything to do with the inner self, the emotional part, or things like that.
Mm,
It's not to say we can't, but given certain circumstances, we may well open up to a trusted friend or somebody that we
yeah.
would respect. Um, yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's just the fact that we just feel vulnerable, and therefore we feel like we need to protect ourselves. It's that sort of hunter gatherer protector type of thing,
Mm,
but it doesn't always serve us well, really, does it?
mm. And quite often the male is quite solution focused. So if someone brings an issue to them in terms of their partner, who might say, I've got a headache, they just have a solution. Go get a Panadol. Do you have Panadol in the UK?
We do have Panadol, yes, and amongst other things, yes. So we know what you're talking about, Jan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure that is the case. Often my wife will say to me, I just need you to listen. I don't need you to try and fix it.
That's
So,
it. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Better
definitely.
fixes.
You recount sort of a number of stories throughout your book, really to help the reader understand how the ESI is, the application of it, and how it can impact different people's lives. Now, I know you do a lot of work around leadership, and I suppose among our listeners, there will be some employers who would be quite interested to know, well, how does this impact leadership, and how would it benefit them as an employer?
Hmm. Well, in my brain potential program, of course, ESI features or just states, and I get leaders to identify the various states that they're in during the course of any given day. But if they've had some difficulty in the workplace as themselves in being a leader and had problems with a team member, or vice versa, the team member has had issues with them, what state were they in when the team member presented these issues to them? And just the identification of, it was, I'm better than you. Oh, okay. So then did that inhibit the conversation, or yeah, it probably did, because I stayed in that state of I'm better than you when my team member was trying to tell me what was
Yeah,
occurring. Hmm.
yeah. I suppose that that can sort of, in a way, in its simplest form, make or break a team. It's one of those where it either attracts somebody to a leader, or they have a respect for a person who is a leader, um,
Yes,
or it repels them. And one of the things that we're finding is that, there's that saying that people don't leave. What's it now? Um, we don't leave jobs. We leave managers.
managers, yes,
And
yes,
I suppose at the end of the day, anything that causes us to engage and be fully committed and loyal, in a sense,
mhm,
is where we feel valued, accepted, supported, encouraged. And so,
absolutely, yeah.
yeah, and I suppose one of the things that we've realized as well with the leadership side is that those things tend to only come about when a leader is able to empathize, and empathy being a great skill, for want of a better term, in a leader. So I suppose
Sure,
w- the work that you would do using your ESI mapping tool. Um, Freud talked about ego states, didn't he? And
yes,
ID and so on. But since then, the work of others and now yourself has actually identified that there are many different states. I think in your book you quote that we could operate between 5 and 15 different states in any week or month. Um,
yes,
and so if we're completely unaware of that, empathy, I suppose, could be one of those states. If we're
Yes.
unaware of that, then we could inadvertently be making choices and exercising behavior that's not actually serving us well. What is that?
Yes. And to put a neuroscientific application to a state Dan Siegel calls a state of mind, and he called it that in his the Neuroscience of Interpersonal Skills, a book he produced in 2012, which was 4 years after my book. I called them states of behavior, and they are in fact both states of mind but displayed by our behavior. States of mind, i.e. they're up here, and they are in fact clusters of neural pathways that come together through the firings from the neurons down the pathways that come together to form a state of behavior. So, for example, as simple as cleaning your teeth. I'm right-handed, for example, so I put the paste on with my left hand, go in to the brain. That's a cluster of neural pathways that are so thick, long, and strong in my brain, I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
probably the same for you. But states of behavior in the workplace, if we keep it to the work, or any place really, that are your intrinsic reactions to other things that are occurring, you've got to ask yourself, and this is where the self-awareness comes in, that's my natural way. I always behave that way. I always react that way. Is it serving you well? And if it's not, and you don't actually just take that away totally, those cluster of neural pathway, that network there, you don't take them away. You just develop another cluster of neural pathways that are different and supportive of those situations. And over time, they will become stronger, thicker, and longer. And these ones never go, but they're not used so much. So
would you say in your book you refer to the executive state, the non-executive state, and the underlying state? So
Yes.
Would you say that the cluster that you now are no longer using, like you say, it's not gone, but does that become like an underlying state? That's goes in the subconscious.
It probably would be more non-executive until years and years had passed by.
Right. Yeah.
And then there is a process in the brain called pruning. And pruning is where the neural networks will just die. But that takes a long time. And it's the pruning, such as when you're a baby, you can't speak. But you know if you cry, you're going to get mum or dad's attention. You're going to get someone's attention, and they're going to feed you, change you, hug you, whatever. But as you grow and you develop language, then you're able to use that language. So different lots of operations are going on in your brain. So the adult today, I know that if I want something, I don't just burst into tears. So I still have the ability to cry, but in relation to getting what I want, those pathways, they're not there anymore. They're probably pruned away. I hope. Anyway.
Right.
I like to think I just stamped my feet in any given moment and said, I
would. Yeah. There are times when I do watch some people's behavior and I think, has that really gone away? That sort of childlike approach. But just a point you mentioned earlier, I was just thinking when you were talking about that they become less and less until eventually they just go. And I was just thinking about the journeys I take when I drive. How many times have I arrived somewhere and can't think about what happened on the journey? I mean, it's a little bit concerning given the fact that you're in charge of, a machine. But having said that, how many of us could actually say, I've automatically done that journey
Yes.
and I can't remember it. Or you've set off on a journey to go one place, but suddenly you find yourself on a different journey because you've got into an automatic mode, as though I'm going to work, when in actual fact it's a weekend, you're actually going somewhere else, and but you've got into that automatic mode. So
Yes.
yeah, that's what was going through my mind when you were describing that part. With regards to your book, I just want to sort of mention this because I think I found the book really helpful, and confirmed some things that I'm already working in. I was mentioning earlier about a tool I use called the Money Habitudes, but in a way, that's looking at identifying attitudes and behaviours that may well or may not be working well for us, and how can we both identify them, and then what can we do to actually change them so they work for us rather than the other way around. And I thought, wow, this really confirms what I've been reading, even though you wrote it back in 2009. I just thought this has been helpful and kind of an eye-opener. So in the book, you introduce us to the area of states, and you also talk about the ESI mapping tool, but you also take us through how to apply that for ourselves. So so rather than it just being theory about somebody else or somewhere else, you're actually taking us through how can we use it to identify within me what are my states, which I thought was really. Do you want to say any more about what you've put in that book that may well be helpful for our listeners?
I think the mapping tool is probably best done by another person. So, right. For example, if you were working on a goal, Phil, yes, you could do it yourself, but it might take a little bit of practice. So it'd be better if somebody like myself works through a map with you and then left it with you, because you could add some states to it over time.
Right.
And when, because our goals are very personal, our goals, you and I might have the same goal, but we've got different states within us that are going to get us to that goal, and we've got different ways of getting there. So first, I think it's best if a professional, a trained ESI consultant actually does the map with you, just to show you what to do. But it's not, once you see it, it's not that unique, because you get the hang of it and you start identifying in your personal life how you responded in an argumentative situation, and you can go, oh gosh, that was my angry state, or that was when I do a map with someone, I don't just name the states, because we can rattle off a whole lot of words. I can be angry, confident, mischievous, thirsty, they're all states. But to compact it into relation to a goal, there'll be some parts of you that are very supportive. There'll be other parts of you that'll be very inhibitive. And the idea to see them out on paper is which of those states are holding you back or helping you move forward. But I also, once we identify a state, we profile the state. And profiling the state means asking you what thoughts, feelings, emotions, past beliefs, behaviors can you identify are present when you're in that executive state.
Right.
And that's the power behind it.
Yeah, and I think that then equips a person to be able to make adjustments within their own life that could have a far-reaching impact on any area of their lives, from relationships, managing money, to the workplace environment, wherever it may be. It's about self-development, isn't it? It's about self-awareness, self-development.
Absolutely, yes.
So you mentioned to me about well, we talked about me being a guinea pig.
Yes.
I don't mean literally, but certainly in terms of sort of going through an exercise, so our listeners get kind of a feel for what it is we're talking about. Do you want to sort of take us through that?
I think that'd be a great idea, because then what we've already said will make a lot more sense to them.
Yes.
So when we were chatting before, I said to you of your clients, but you can turn this around to you personally if you like. What in relation to their money struggles, money worries, whatever reason they come to you for, what would a goal be if you said to them, well, where do you see yourself 3 years from now? What typically could a goal be for them?
I think the most common goal that I come across with my clients is to be financially secure.
Okay.
And it's an interesting one, because one of the money habitudes is security. And when somebody is a dominant user of that particular money personality, it's usually around the area of wanting to feel safe and secure. And so that seems to be quite a common one.
So I would unpack that a little more, and I no doubt you already do. But what does security in relation to money mean to you? Because that's it could be as general terms as I just want to be happy.
Yeah, sure. Again, another common answer to that question, and it's a very good question, is to have enough money to pay my bills, enough money to live. It's usually that word enough, which is quite intriguing, because what's enough to one, it may be different to another.
Yes,
but it's
sure.
that response within themselves in terms of having enough money. That tends to be the response. I think for
Right.
myself, it's not just having enough just for today or for this month, but it's also thinking about what kind of life goals do I have. So what one example would be, I would love to go and visit Canada. I mentioned Australia. Australia is another place I would love to go and visit, but that would be perhaps one of my life goals. I had one life goal, which was to go and visit New Zealand, and I've done that. I've achieved that. So it would then be thinking about my money in terms of not just meeting today or this month, but also what could I do to plan toward meeting that life goal. And I'm just using that as an example.
So if you've been to New Zealand, that's a little further than Australia. So you could make it to Australia, Phil.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? It was interesting. We actually flew directly across Australia.
Oh,
And
could have dropped in.
yeah, literally. And believe me, I have actually done that twice, but not from that height. But what was interesting was how red Australia is in the central parts.
Yes.
So it was cloudy around the coast, so we couldn't get to see the greenery, the contrast between the sort of the central part and then the coastline. So we couldn't see the coastline, but we saw, and it just seemed to go on for hours and hours.
It's a huge country.
It is. It is. It is.
Yes, but we're off track. We better come back to your goal. Is it Canada you want to visit?
Yeah. So Canada. Yeah, we just use that as an example. So that would
All
be
right.
a life goal.
Yes.
And but obviously, any life goal has other implications. One of which is a monetary implication. So, which would affect the here and now as well as the future. So,
Well, let's try and map that all out. But
okay.
I'll ask you some questions, and we'll see how we go in terms of developing your ESI map to get to Canada.
Right. Great.
All right.
I'm just wondering what I set myself up for now.
Oh, and you know this is going live, so everyone will make you accountable.
Yeah, they
Hey,
will.
Phil, have you bought your tickets yet?
Yes. No excuses.
No. So, Phil, when you think about visiting Canada, which is one of my goals on my list as well, when you think about visiting Canada, is there a part of you that just knows that you can have it? It is so, it's like so supportive. You just know. And if there is that part that goes, yeah, I'm going to get it, could you give that part of you a name? And
Yeah,
it might be confident or, yeah.
Yeah, I would call that part expectation. And yeah, there is a feeling within me, the outworking of which, I've not sort of worked out, but there is a feeling of me within me that yes, that is doable. I can achieve that.
So
But I would call it expectation.
Okay. So when you're in that state of expectation, because it doesn't just apply to Canada, you would have it for many other parts of your life. When you're in that state of expectation, thinking about going to Canada, what are your thoughts, feelings, behaviors? What's expectation all about?
I think one of my thoughts is freedom, and the reason why I say that is, in my mind, when I think of Canada, I think of a wide open space of adventure and freedom, vastness, and that's something that I quite like. It's appealing to me. And I think the opposite side to that would be feeling constrained. So
let's stay with expectations. So expectation, you've got freedom. What else? Name some more words that come.
Well, I mentioned adventure. I suppose that's to do with I like to explore new things. I think there's a part of me that I've always maintained with other people that I'm not a creative person. And yeah, actually, there's a part of me that is a creative. I mean, hence why the podcast has happened and so on, and some of the things that I do. So it's recognizing there is a creative element, and the thought of places like Canada would be like exploring new things, new ideas.
So I've written down, see what I'm doing now is profiling your state of expectations. So it represents to you freedom, adventure, exploration.
Yeah.
I'm getting excitement, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but expectation, does excitement live there or?
Yeah, well, put it this way, Jan. If somebody were to say to me, by the way, Phil, you're on your way to Canada tomorrow, I would be like a little kid in a candy shop. So excitement, without a doubt, it is there because it so appeals to me. It's
right.
is kind of liberating in a sense.
Right. So when we were talking about expectation, and I love that you give me explanations as to why you choose a word. It's wonderful.
I think my Jan, my friends and people listening who actually know me will not be surprised at my explanations, because simply I'm one of these, why say in a sentence what you could say in a paragraph?
But while you're in that state of expectation and feeling excitement, and you could hear you could hear the uplift in his voice. There was a word you mentioned that was the opposite of freedom, and that was the word constraint. When you think of visiting Canada, is there a part of you that holds you back, that restricts you, inhibits you?
I think if I think about around that word constraint, money, what would it cost me to get there? What would it cost me to be able to do the things? Because it's not just about getting there, it's about experiencing Canada, experiencing things there. So what would it cost me? And so there's a part of me that would say that potentially could be a limiting factor.
So would we call that state, and I don't want to once again put words into your mouth, money constraints or money worries, money concerns?
Yeah, I'd probably say money constraints.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd probably call it that, because in a way, it's the kind of thing that if you dwell on that part, it constrains you. So therefore, you're not that free, and you're not able to be adventurous and creative and all those positive things.
So the state called money constraints exists for you when you think about going to Canada, but probably in other areas of your life at times.
Yes.
So put yourself into that state of money constraints and see if you can rattle off some words that describe, because we want to profile now that state of money constraints.
Right. Lack.
Lack, yes.
Would be one. Yeah, it's a hard thinking about that one. When I think of constraints, I think lack of money, time, length of time. So that there's that mindset that says this will probably take a long time, which would then say to me, well, how much time do I have myself, in terms of lifespan? So on the one side, I think, yes, it's doable. It's achievable, is this. But if I think of the money constraint side, I think, how long would it take? Have I got enough time? Will there be sufficient? Once I get there, would I find that I don't actually have enough?
And so that comes back to lack, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That lack. So you've just beautifully described your inhibitive state in relation to visiting Canada, which we called money constraints. And to profile that, when you're in that state, you feel lack, time frames. How much time do I have left to live, to do it?
Yeah.
Will there be sufficient dollars, pounds?
Yeah.
When I'm there, money.
Yeah.
So I would, if I was working with you, I'd probably elicit from you a few other states, but I'm very aware of time right now. And so let's go back to the goal to visit Canada. And what you've identified was a supportive state, expectations that give you freedom, adventure, exploration, excitement. And you also identified a part of you that's holding you back. So it's inhibitive, and that's lack, money constraints, and it's lack time frames. How much time do I have left? Will there be sufficient money to do it in? So imagining we've got a few others, but think about your goal right now to visit Canada. Are these two in balancing each other out, or is one greater? Is there one that's stronger than the other?
I certainly think, and I know others probably identify with this, I certainly think that money constrained, the state of money constrained, could well be a stronger state at this moment in time. And which then sort of inhibits your focus on the expectation state. So, and I can actually see as well how having that state, or almost like camping in that state, could then inform the choices that I make. And I think that whilst that remains, say, a strong state, like you say in your book, an executive state, that wouldn't serve me well. It would kind of undermine the expectation state of, yes, this is doable, we can do this. And that's how it feels, a little bit like that.
So I'm feeling exactly what you said, that the money restraints, given the situation, time, and place that you're in right now, is executive. And the expectation one is what we'd call non-executive. It's there, you've got it, but it's not driving force for you to pack up and go tomorrow because you were told you had everything was paid for. So if I was coaching you, I'd probably say we might leave this goal on the back burner for a while and look at what's current day in your life, because I can see that the inhibitor is overriding the supportive state that's going to get you there one day.
Yes. No, that's interesting. It's and it does fit very well with what we do around money and how we identify the money personality types, and what we look at in how we can bring some balance, help the individual identify areas that they might be able to exercise that they don't normally exercise, and look for ways in which they could exercise that slight difference in behavior and difference in mindset. Because we're taking it like small steps. We're changing the course of a tanker.
And a complete map would consist of at least 5 different states. And there might be in there 2 that are inhibitive and 3 that are supportive. And they would quite possibly link together. So I would go on to link them, that expectations and maybe confident was another state in there, or maybe it was the money saver was linking with expectations. But given our time tonight, we just want to give the audience a snapshot of what this mapping tool is all about.
I think this is brilliant, Jan, from a point of view that it's like going on a journey, isn't it? How do you know which way to go if you don't know where you're starting from?
Yes.
And it's establishing where am I at the moment in my own life?
Yes.
What's my mindset? What's my attitude? What kind of behaviors do I display in different circumstances? And are they serving me well? And if they are, great. If not, what can I do to change them so I can become less anxious, more confident, feeling more secure with my finances. But actually, you can apply that in any area, because you think of relationships, the working environment, like you talk about in terms of leadership, or supervisory, or an executive in a firm, who people look to give direction. If the behaviors and the choices that they make actually inhibit their ability to succeed in driving a company in the right direction, people will very quickly lose confidence.
Yes, yes. And going back to people join an organization because of perhaps what it stands for, and stay for the people, the clients, or whoever it is they're working with, but they will leave because of poor management.
Yeah.
And poor management, with a lot of people that I work with who aren't necessarily at management level, but that's where their issue lies. To actually work with their particular upline manager would be a great thing to do, although my client happens to be the team member, because just a slight adjustment in their behavior, in their style, in their approach to the people that they have working for them, could make a huge difference.
Yes, certainly. It's that I found this really helpful to be able to talk about these things, because I can see the connections. It's a little bit like putting the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together and formulating a sort of complete picture. But we are talking about, becoming more self-aware. And sometimes, like you say, we need someone external to help us begin that journey. Not that there aren't things that we can do ourselves, but oftentimes it's like I could be stuck and I just need somebody to help me sort of to a place where I can begin to move forward and understand more about what makes me tick in a way. The other thing about it as well is that we found where people become more self-aware, they also become more other aware. So if they're influencing other people, they become more aware of other people, more aware of the impact they have on them, but also more aware of them as an individual, and perhaps would value more, what are their expectations, what are their hopes and dreams, and so on. So I found this whole thing, so helpful in that way, and I'm sure many of our listeners will also find it quite helpful. I would certainly recommend your book to anyone. I've already done that. I've recommended it to some friends in Norway. So, Jan, you might get an invitation to go and speak in Norway, as you did in Finland.
As I did in Finland, and then the book was published in Finnish.
Yeah, so the book is in English.
Yes.
In actual fact, for our UK listeners, yes. Let me just take a pic. Just put that up again, Jan. There we go. For our listeners in the UK, you can actually get Jan Sky's book, The Many Parts of You, through Amazon. So if you just sort of search through Amazon, you'll find the book there. You can get it on Kindle and you can get it in paperback. And I would strongly recommend it. As I've mentioned already, I recommended it to some friends of mine in Norway. So Jan is also a speaker. So if ever you get the opportunity to hear Jan speak, I would do. And you've spoken in Finland. And as you rightly said, you've had your book published in Finnish as well. So
yes.
All the best in reading that, Jan.
Yes. And my son, who has the driest sense of humor, when I picked up the copies from the post office and opened the packet, I rang him. I said, my book, I've got it in Finnish. He said, so when are you going to write one in Start?
Oh, dear me.
And, sick jokes from the sun.
No. Well, Jan, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it has been before, in speaking with you. I really do appreciate your time. I appreciate the work that you do, and thank you for sharing it with us. So all that remains for me to say is, Jan, all the very best. And
Thank you, Phil.
and I hope that I will be able to invite you back in time to come and speak to us again.
It would be my absolute pleasure. And if you're in Australia, you must let me know, as I will do if I ever go back to the UK.
Brilliant.
Which is on the cards.
It's on the, yeah, I'll drop in, Jan. I'll drop in.
Right.
So, but no, thank you very much. You take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.